Welcome, scholars, to today's lesson, lesson 2-1.6, the Silk Road. Today we're going to be talking about what was once the largest avenue of trade in the world. Actually, it was for a couple thousand years. I mean, really, this thing's been around. And it is what's going to first connect Europe and Asia. This first happens during the time of Alexander the Great. He's pushing eastward. He's pushing into India, and he doesn't make it to China, but he comes into contact with those who have been in contact with the great civilization of the Han Chinese. And pretty soon, Europe and China become aware of each other. And with this awareness comes this desire to know more and to profit from that knowledge. It's really going to be the Han Chinese in particular that make positive steps in this direction. They're going to expand trade westward. They've got some goods, they've got some products that they know are valuable, and they want to access these new markets. So they're going to be pushing westward with their trade, in particular hoping to trade silk to the west. Silk is actually a rather low-cost item once you know how to produce it, but the Chinese were the only ones who knew how it was made. And so they carefully guarded the secret of silk creation and therefore profited a lot on its trade. Now, in addition to silk, the Chinese also traded other goods like porcelain and spices, two other goods that were real low cost for the Chinese, but had real high value in the international market. This here is Chinese porcelain, the style and the type that was really popular during the Middle Ages. It's actually just made of this fine white clay that only the Chinese knew of this particular clay. This was so popular in Europe throughout the time that this type of porcelain was simply named China. So if you've ever heard of porcelain referred to as China, that's where that comes from. This here is a silk worm. Silk is actually the product of a worm. Makes these little cocoons, and then you can unravel those and weave it into a fine cloth. Now, Western goods were also highly sought after in the East, although were not considered as valuable. It's the East that profits mostly off of this trade. But Western goods like olive oil and wine are going to make their way eastward along the Silk Road. Now, this trade is going to be profitable and is going to continue intermittently, not all the time, but intermittently beyond the Greek era into the Persian, Roman, Byzantine, and Islamic eras. The Silk Road is going to be connecting east and west. Now, it's not just trade goods, silk and olive oil, that are making their way along the trade routes. Wherever there is trade, there is contact between civilizations and the exchange of ideas. So it is along the Silk Road that we see the spread of religions. Christianity is going to travel along the Silk Road and actually show up in China in the 900s, 1000s. Christianity starts popping up in the Far East. You also see the expansion of Islam all the way into Southeast Asia and the spread of Buddhism. Different styles of art and sculpture are also going to appear along the trade route. And anywhere the Silk Road went was also the unfortunate side effect of disease. Most notably in what we studied, the Black Death is going to spread along these trade routes, along these Silk Road, and that is how the Black Death ends up in Europe. Now, the trade was highly profitable and highly sought after by everybody, but trade along the Silk Road was inconsistent. The road passes through many different nations. It could pass through as many as 7 or 8 different nations traveling from China to Constantinople in the Byzantine Empire. And if any of those nations is at war, it can totally disrupt trade through that. And if it gets disrupted, it doesn't matter that everybody else would like that trade to continue, it will really slow down and really affect them. Additionally, you could have empires who impose limited trade. Certain goods aren't allowed to pass through their empire, or they can tax really high, which is going to discourage trade. This happens with the Ottoman Empire. They're going to impose large taxes on the trade routes. And this slows down trade really down to a trickle because there's not as much profit to be made on the exchange of these goods. So this really does limit trade. Occasionally, trade is disrupted for decades, even on a few occasions, a century or more. Trade just kind of stops. And this is a problem because people have become very used to, very accustomed to this trade. And when the trade stops, it really damages their economies. So this inconsistent trade is going to continue to be a problem all the way up until Mongol unification. We thought we were done with the Mongols, but we're never going to be done with the Mongols. The Mongols are going to come up over and over and over throughout the rest of the year, so don't feel comfortable that the Mongols are done. Now, in the context of the Silk Road, it's important that we remember that the Mongol Empire is just huge. I mean, it is unbelievably huge, the largest land empire in the history of the world, and it's going to be connecting the east. Actually, they conquer as far south as Hanoi, all the way up into Poland. So, with all of this being connected by the Mongols, they're under unity. They're under the Pax Mongolica, the Great Mongol Peace. This is, this period of internal peace within the Mongol Empire is a great opportunity for trade to expand and to thrive, and the Mongols are going to encourage it. Not just the trade of goods, but the exchange of ideas. They want everybody to learn from everybody else. They want, Chinese crops and Chinese products that are best produced in the Middle East to be produced in the Middle East, and they were very big on efficiency and the spread of ideas and trade. And it's going to be through this Mongol influence that we start to see some of the keys to eventual Western dominance and Western civilization reach Europe. These three most important items were paper, gunpowder, and the compass. Paper for the spread of ideas and the new thinking throughout Europe. Gunpowder because they're going to become very militaristic during the Renaissance and afterward. And then the compass, which is really going to kick the age of exploration off. With the compass, sea navigation becomes much more possible. And these are all going to reach Europe through the Silk Road during this time of Mongol unification. Well, as we know, the Mongol Empire does shatter. It fragments and it breaks apart. And once we have all these conflicting different khanates and sultanates and kingdoms appearing along that Silk Road, the old problems continue. Intermittent trade, sometimes cut off for long periods of time, sometimes under high taxation. And Europeans no longer have the access to Eastern goods that they once had. They still have the desire, just not the access. And so Europeans are going to start to think of other ways that they might be able to reach Asia. If the land route is going to take too long, it takes a couple years to make this journey, and that's under the best of conditions. And this was far from the best of conditions, having to pass through all these different empires. So what's another way to do that? Well, the Europeans are going to start to turn to sailing, and they're going to start to turn to ships, and they start to think, hey, if we can't go by land, or if it's too expensive to go by land, let's start to explore the world and see if we can't just get there by sea. And this is exactly what the Portuguese managed to do. In the 1480s, they're going to round the southern tip of Africa and eventually reach India and Asia by sea, kicking off the European age of exploration, which we are going to go into abundant detail on during the third and final trimester of this year. So this is how the Silk Road and its decline ties into the age of exploration and how we're going to end the year. I'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good Thanksgiving.